When both you and the narcissist stop talking, the world does not get quiet. It explodes because at that moment, someone finally loses control, and it is not you. Many people believe that mutual silence means the story has ended, but the reality is much more disturbing. This is the moment when the narcissist starts their true psychological downward spiral and when your healing really begins. Stick with me because what happens next is the part nobody gets you ready for. If this is already feeling uncomfortably familiar, stay here. You need to grasp the psychological ground you are walking on because understanding this is how you break the cycle for good. Let us look closer. When both you and the narcissist stop reaching out to each other, the very first thing that happens on their end is what I call the adjustment phase. It is subtle, it is psychological, and it is something most people do not spot because it happens in quiet behind the scenes, long before the narcissist ever makes a move. When you go silent, you see it as an emotional change, a boundary, or a step toward getting better. But the narcissist does not read your silence that way. They view it as data. Your lack of an answer becomes something they must figure out, not something they respect. They start to judge how they lost their grip, not how they hurt you. Narcissists do not look inside themselves the way healthy people do. Instead, they check the situation. Did you get distracted? Are you punishing them? Did someone else enter the picture? Are you testing them? They look for the angle, the reason, and the possible threat. Your silence becomes a puzzle they need to fix because not knowing shakes them up. During this adjustment period, they may not contact you at all. In fact, their quietness is not because they do not care. It is a strategy. They might watch what you do online, check your friend groups, or see who is talking to you. They are collecting facts, waiting for your next emotional move. Narcissists believe that people they once controlled will always come back, so your silence is not seen as a final goodbye. It is seen as a temporary pause. This is why they do not panic right away. Instead, they wait, assuming you will break the silence first, just like you have done before. They count on the habits they created in you. The guilt, the fear of fighting, the hope for peace. They expect you to give in. When you do not, their reevaluation gets more intense. They start to wonder if their influence is slipping, and that is when the threat becomes real to them. Silence in their world is never just neutral. It is either a chance to take back power or a danger to their ego. And the longer you stay quiet, the more they feel the ground move beneath them because your silence breaks the power dynamic they relied on. When both sides fall into silence, the emotional experience is completely different for you than it is for the narcissist. This difference shows an uncomfortable truth. You feel the loss, but they feel the inconvenience. When you stop contacting them, you are often carrying the heavy load of what happened. You are sorting through the emotional mess, the broken trust, the unanswered questions, and the mental tiredness. You may feel sadness, withdrawal, confusion, or even guilt. You are grieving not just the relationship, but the version of yourself that put up with so much. Your silence comes from emotional overload. You have reached a spot where your mind and body cannot handle more chaos. You are trying to take back your space, dignity, and clear thinking. That inner struggle is heavy, and it hurts your sleep, your self-esteem, your memories, and your sense of who you are. Meanwhile, the narcissist does not view the silence with emotional depth. They do not sit with the loss the way you do. They do not think about what went wrong or how they hurt you or what needs to change. Instead, their first reaction is based on inconvenience. Your silence messes up their routine, not their heart. They are used to having access to your attention, your reactions, your apologies, your caretaking, and even your arguments. All of it fed their sense of being important. When you go silent, that stream of validation suddenly turns off. This does not break them emotionally. It simply annoys them. They feel the lack of supply the way someone feels when they lose access to a service they relied on. It is a disruption, a delay, a frustration. They are not thinking, I lost someone special. They are thinking, why aren't they answering me? Your pain and their inconvenience exist in two separate mental worlds. You are mourning the relationship while they are checking their access. You are trying to rebuild yourself while they are calculating how your silence hurts their ego. You feel the emptiness. They feel the interruption. As time goes on, this difference becomes even clearer. You slowly start to see how heavy the emotional burden really was, and how much of yourself you quieted just to keep the peace. They start to wonder why something that used to work so easily is failing. Your emotional response suddenly isn't working. The imbalance becomes visible. Your silence forces you deeper into thinking and healing, while it forces them into annoyance and entitlement. The emotional weight you carry is huge, while the discomfort they feel is tied not to losing you, but to losing the ease of your obedience. When both sides go silent, the narcissist does not feel that quiet as a pause or a mutual step back. They feel it as a direct challenge to their ego, because silence from someone they once controlled feels like rebellion. The narcissist views relationships through a lens of power, not sharing. So when you no longer answer, no longer reach out, and no longer give them attention, it breaks the mental hierarchy they believe they set up. They view your silence as an act of defiance, even if your goal was simply to protect your peace or get your thoughts clear. In their mind, silence is never neutral. It is an insult. It is resistance. It is proof that their influence might be slipping. This is why silence affects them more deeply than any argument. Arguments give them attention. Reacting gives them power. Even anger proves to them that they still matter in your emotional world. But silence removes them from the center of the stage, and that removal threatens the weak story they rely on. Your silence forces them to face the possibility that they are not as needed, desired, or powerful as they thought. Narcissists cannot handle not knowing, and your lack of communication creates exactly that, a space they cannot control or figure out. Instead of seeing your silence as a healthy boundary, they see it as a provocation. This is when their inner voice becomes twisted. They may tell themselves you are being disrespectful, ungrateful, or tricky. They may view your distance as a game, assuming you are trying to get a reaction out of them. Their ego leads them to believe that your silence is a tactic, not a sign of tiredness or self-protection. Some narcissists will mentally shift to a competitive mode, seeing the silence as a battle of wills they must win. Others will frame it as betrayal, convincing themselves you abandoned them. Even though they may have treated you badly for months or years, they rewrite the meaning of your silence to protect their self-image, not to understand your experience. As this psychological tension builds, the narcissist's sense of control begins to shake. Your silence becomes a mirror showing their own insecurity. And rather than sitting with that discomfort, they begin creating stories that restore their superiority. They may assume you will eventually give in, because you always have. Or they may start planning ways to punish you emotionally for not behaving according to their script. In their world, silence threatens their ego because it suggests something they cannot accept. You may no longer be under their psychological influence. When both sides stop contacting each other, something very different happens internally for the narcissist than for you. For you, the silence may feel like space to breathe, space to process, and space to finally understand what you survived. But for the narcissist, your absence creates a kind of psychological hole that forces them to face something they spend their entire lives avoiding: the loss of control. They do not think in terms of mutual distance or mutual boundaries. Instead, they view your disengagement as a break in the system they built to support their identity. Narcissists do not work from an inner sense of worth. Their self-esteem is built from the outside, held together by the reactions, attention, and validation of the people around them. You were part of that system. Your emotions, your responses, your pattern of returning after a fight, all of that supported their sense of superiority and influence. When you go silent, you interrupt that cycle. That interruption forces them into a moment of psychological exposure. It confronts them with their dependence on your engagement, something they do not want to admit even to themselves. They built a story where they were the dominant one, the one in control, the one calling the shots. Your silence challenges that story. It signals that you may have stepped out of the role they gave you, and this shakes their carefully managed identity. Without your reactions, they have nothing to push against, nothing to manipulate, and nothing to use as proof of their power. This absence becomes a threat, not because they care about the relationship in a meaningful or emotionally mature way, but because it breaks the foundation of control that allowed them to feel important. This is the moment when their internal state becomes restless. They may begin replaying past conversations, searching for signs they missed, They may wonder if someone else has taken their place. They may start looking for ways to take back power, even if they still haven't contacted you. The silence becomes louder for them than it does for you because they do not know what is happening on your side. That lack of seeing robs them of the illusion that they can predict your behavior. They are suddenly outside of your world, not at the center of it. And that loss of being the center is psychologically unbearable for them. Their mind shifts from arrogance to anxiety, from entitlement to suspicion, from certainty to instability, and all of it is triggered by something as simple as your absence. When both you and the narcissist retreat into silence, it may seem from the outside like nothing is happening, but internally the narcissist begins moving through a predictable set of compensatory behaviors designed to restore their sense of control. One of the most common reactions is their attempt to fill the empty space your absence created through hoovering, baiting, or triangulation. These tactics are not random. They are psychological tools the narcissist uses when they feel their influence slipping. Hoovering happens when they realize your silence is not temporary. At first, they assume you will return because that is what they have trained you to do. When you do not, the panic starts. Hoovering is their attempt to pull you back into the cycle, not because they value you emotionally, but because losing you threatens their ego stability. It may send a soft message, a nostalgic memory, or a plea centered on a crisis. They may appear sorry, reflective, or unusually attentive. They adjust their tone to whatever they think will work because the goal isn't reconnection. It is reinstating control. If hoovering fails or feels too vulnerable for them, they shift to baiting. Baiting is designed to spark an emotional reaction from you, whether positive or negative. Narcissists do not care which direction your emotions go. They care about being the cause. They might post something online aimed at sparking jealousy, send a sharp or dismissive message to get you angry, or create unnecessary drama that forces you to respond. Any reaction, even a bad one, restores their sense of relevance. Silence strips them of power. So baiting becomes their way of poking the wound they created, hoping you will bleed just enough to remind them you are still accessible. When those strategies do not work, they move up to triangulation. This is where they bring in someone else, an ex, a new partner, a friend, a family member, not for real connection, but to craft a story that puts them back in control. They might show off a new relationship, hint that someone else appreciates them more, or exaggerate your silence to appear like the victim. The entire point of triangulation is to make you feel displaced, insecure, or replaceable. It is meant to lure you back into defending your worth or taking back your position in their life. These behaviors are not proofs of love. They are proofs of dependence. The narcissist relies on outside supply to maintain a sense of identity, and when you remove that supply, they scramble for ways to patch the hole. Hoovering, baiting, and triangulation are their attempts to regain psychological dominance, not emotional closeness. Their reactions are born from fear, entitlement, and ego disruption, all triggered by your silence. When the silence stretches on both sides, something deep begins to unfold that most people do not expect. While you may view the quiet as a step toward peace or closure, the narcissist experiences it as a growing sense of unease. Your silence is not seen as calm. It is seen as a loss of control. And because their identity is so heavily dependent on the reactions of others, especially people they once pulled into their orbit, the absence of your response triggers a kind of internal alarm. What becomes important here is understanding that your quiet is not their peace, it is their panic. Narcissists rely on emotional stimulation from others to keep up the fragile structure of their self-esteem. They need attention, admiration, conflict, drama, anything that places them at the center of someone else's emotional world. When you stop supplying that energy, they feel an internal collapse beginning. They do not know how to regulate themselves without outside feedback, and your silence takes away that feedback. This creates a psychological chain reaction. At first, they may try to dismiss your silence, pretending it does not matter. They may act unbothered, detached, or even relieved. But this is a defensive mask. As time passes, the quiet becomes harder for them to ignore. Without your attention anchoring their inflated self-image, they start to feel insignificant, overlooked, and irrelevant. These feelings are unbearable for them because they strike at the core of their biggest fear, being ordinary, invisible, or unimportant. While you may be using the silence to gather strength or rebuild your sense of self, they experience the same silence as an emotional void that threatens their entire identity. Your nervous system begins to calm without the constant tension or unpredictability they brought into your life. The fog lifts. You start to recognize your worth and reclaim parts of yourself that were suppressed. You find clarity in the quiet while they find chaos. This contrast becomes even more stark the longer the silence continues. They might begin obsessing, replaying interactions, imagining scenarios, or inventing reasons why you are no longer engaging. The uncertainty eats at them. They do not miss the relationship, they miss the reflection of themselves they used to see in your reactions. And so while your silence is healing, theirs is shaking them up. You find pieces of yourself returning. They feel pieces of their constructed identity slipping. What feels peaceful and necessary for you becomes agitating and threatening for them. This difference in experience is what ultimately exposes the imbalance that existed all along, showing you that the quiet sets you free while it slowly unravels them internally. When the silence settles on both sides, something begins to shift inside you in a way that often feels slow, confusing, and strangely relieving all at once. Your nervous system, which has been living in a state of constant alert throughout the relationship, finally gets a chance to stop bracing for the next emotional blow. Narcissistic relationships create a chronic state of high alert. You learn to anticipate their moods, their reactions, and their unpredictable emotional climate. Your body becomes trained to expect tension even in moments of calm. So when the silence begins, your system does not instantly relax. At first, it does not know how. You may feel agitated, restless, or uncomfortable with the quiet. You may view the lack of conflict as something being wrong. That response is not weakness. It is biology. Your body has been trained to operate in survival mode. But as time passes, the fog starts to lift. Your mind slowly untangles itself from the chaos. You begin noticing how your thoughts change when you are not constantly anticipating their next outburst or manipulation. Your sleep improves. You start feeling moments of stillness that you haven't felt in years. This is your nervous system readjusting. It is recognizing that the danger has subsided. This is the beginning of real healing, the kind that does not require permission, apology, or closure from them. This is the moment when you start reclaiming emotional bandwidth that was once entirely consumed by their needs, demands, and crises. You rediscover your capacity to think clearly, to feel your own emotions without someone else manipulating or invalidating them, and to make decisions based on your own values instead of walking on eggshells.